I'm a supported events bookseller here. We host in-person events along with partnered and supported events, trips, and classes. We've recently relocated both of our branch locations at Union Market and the Wharf and are now hosting events there as well. For a full list of confirmed events, please go to our website, politics-prose.com. Before we get started today, I'd like to ask you to please silence your cell phones so as not to disrupt the event. When we get to the time for opening the floor to your questions, we've placed a standing microphone at the end of the aisle to your right. Please line up at the mic so that everyone can hear your question, as we want that question to be heard in our recording of the event. We are live streaming tonight's program, and you or anyone you know can also soon find it at the Politics and Prose YouTube channel. Following the Q&A, we'll have a signing up here at this table, so if you've not already purchased the book, we have many copies behind our registers at the front of the store. We will ask you to line up, starting here at the pillar. We will also come by the line to ask your name for personalizations, so please have your books ready for us. Once the event is complete, we ask that you fold up your chairs, lean them against the walls or the counters over here to help us out a bit. So now, without further ado, I am very excited to introduce our author, Bakari Sellers, who made history in 2006 when, at just 22 years of age, he defeated a 26-year incumbent state representative to become the youngest member of the South Carolina State Legislature and the youngest African-American elected official in the nation. In 2014, he was a Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor in the state of South Carolina. Sellers is a CNN political analyst and a practicing attorney who fights to give a voice to the voiceless. In this powerful and persuasive book, Sellers expands on the issues he addressed in his New York Times bestseller, My Vanishing Country, examining national politics and policies that deeply impact not only Black people in his home state of South Carolina, but the lives of millions of African Americans in communities across the nation. In 2020, while discussing the murder of George Floyd on CNN, he spoke from the heart, sharing devastating insight that touched millions around the world. It's just so much pain. You get so tired. We have Black children. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I mean, what do I tell her? I'm raising a son. I have no idea what to tell him. It's hard being Black in this country when your life is not valued and people are worried about the protesters and the looters. And it's just people who are frustrated for far too long and have not had their voices heard. 4 years later, in his new book, Sellers has an answer to the question he raised on CNN, offering much-needed prescriptions to help all Black American lives. Sellers explores inequities in healthcare, education, early childhood education, and policing, drawing on interviews with numerous thought leaders such as pioneering voting rights and poverty activist, the Reverend William Barber, and Ben Crump, the civil rights legend who successfully uses the law to achieve justice for people of color in racially charged cases. He also shares his thoughts on conservative media and the forces and dark money behind firebrands such as Tucker Carlson. This thoughtful and practical work is a timely meditation on the state of our world today and how we can all play a part in making it better for tomorrow. Sellers will be in conversation with Tiffany D. Cross. Cross most recently hosted the Cross Connection on MSNBC. She is the author of Say It Louder, Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy, and previously served as a resident fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School's Institute of Politics. Her broad experience across media, politics, and policy includes more than 2 decades of navigating newsrooms and campaigns while engaging different constituencies on the ground. She is a former DC bureau chief of BET News and a CNN associate producer covering Capitol Hill for the network's weekend show unit. She also previously served as a field producer for America's Most Wanted and Discovery Communications. So please welcome Bakari Sellers and Tiffany Cross.
Hi, everybody. How y'all doing?
It's funny. I just looked at Tiffany and said, America's Most Wanted.
You know, I gotta update that bio. That was like
You're so
15 years
versatile.
ago. Well, it was a while ago. That was like 15, 20 years ago.
Okay.
This is where you gasp. What? You were alive 15, 20 years ago? Yes. Yes. How are you,
I'm
Bakari?
doing well. I'm grateful to be here with you. So I tell people I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And on this Friday, where you guys could have been anywhere in the world, it's good to see some familiar faces. I'm glad that you all are here. My daughter Kai is here.
I see Kai in the
Yeah.
blue wave guy.
Oh, hey, Lauren. And Lauren in the back. So family is here. We appreciate everybody for coming out. And then thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You know, you're one of my dearest friends. We talk all the time.
Every day. We're in a group chat together.
Yeah, that group. Yeah. Shh.
I know if that group chat ever got out.
Yeah. So yeah, but thank you so much. And one of the things they didn't mention in your bio is you guys need to make sure that you listen to none other than my three of my best friends in the world, but Tiffany Cross, Angela Rye, and Andrew Gillum on their new podcast, the Native Land Podcast. So I have to give that a shout out too.
Thank you, Bakari.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
appreciate you. How are you guys doing? Yes?
Well,
All right.
They here.
Yes, on a Friday night. Well, your daughter, she's a college student, and so she's like, it's a really happening thing at the bookstore on this Friday night is what they're going
This is probably going to cost me $300, but okay.
So I have a question for you guys that I'm going to ask to Bakari, but I'll ask you guys first. How is the racial reckoning going for you guys? Yeah. Same.
Everybody just looked at each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we understood the looks. We all understood the unspoken language. Bakari, how's the racial reckoning going?
So one of the reasons I wrote the moment, it's a few moments that we highlight. It's the moment that was described in my bio when I was on CNN, and I was on TV early in the morning. It was back when we had pajama pants on with our suits, and we were at the dining room table, and my twins were in the bed sleep, and Kai was upstairs getting ready to do some virtual school. And my beard was grown out and my hair was grown out. Don Lemon used to joke and say I looked like a young Teddy Pendergrass. And the segment before me was Felonious Floyd, George's brother, and Ben Crump. And it was a very powerful, emotional segment. And then it kind of came to us, and it was me and Dante Stallworth, and John Berman was doing the interview. And he posed a very poignant question about how I felt at that particular time. And it was hard because you're just listening to the pain in Felonious's voice, and he began to break down as well. And so everybody who knows me knows I'm very, very emotional. And so I began to have one of those uglier cries on TV where your voice gets a little high pitched and you struggle to get your words out. But I wanted to be as clear as I could through the tears about the pain that I was feeling about the experience of being Black in this country. And then I went back to sleep. And when I woke up, my phone would not stop buzzing and ringing. I mean, it got, nearly 100 million views on YouTube, and it was, all over the place. It was the topic of the CNN editorial call. It was, Twitter everywhere. And it was just a powerful moment. Another moment that I talk about to kind of kick the book off is this picture, which stands out to me. Sometimes I go back and go through my father's pictures from the movement, and there was this picture that he had. He was one of the members of SNCC. And in this picture is Jim Foreman, John Lewis, Stokely, and they had just gotten out of jail because they were protesting apartheid in front of the South African embassy in New York. But also in that picture was Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier. And so it was this magnificent cross-section of Black intelligentsia, wealth, entertainment, pop culture, and grassroots activism. And so my father and I had this kind of push and pull back and forth about how far we've come, and we can talk about that too, Tiffany, because he has an opinion that I disagree with. And then the last part is we talk really, really about COVID and the devastation it had on communities of color. And the fact that through all of these moments, I deduced that we missed the moment. Mm-hmm. And this was a racial reckoning that was not. And this was an opportunity for us to address a lot of systemic and structural ills in our country. And, I think we got about $1,800 I think it
Right.
was, and just moved on. We buried our loved ones. We tried to rebuild our businesses, and many of the and you can argue that we've regressed since
Mhm.
that time. You've seen, what happens after reconstructions. What we're seeing right now is very similar.
Yeah, the pendulum is swinging. I want to get into what you said about your dad.
Sure.
Um, I host another podcast where each week
You
I'm
just
talking.
how many mics you got? I mean, you just podcasting everywhere.
Well, because you made me think about it
Yeah.
when you talked about your dad. On across generations, each week it's an elder, a younger, and me.
Sure.
And what I find when we talk about these issues, the elder, is always like, "Keep living, honey. Ain't nothing new under the sun." And the younger is like, "Rah rah rah."
Yeah.
So for us, where Barack Obama was like this major political
Sure.
figure, he was in our ceiling in some ways, and for younger people, he's the floor. So I'm curious with your
Yeah.
father, having been on the front lines and really truly skin in the game. So much respect to him, and you come from a lineage of those folks. What is his opinion on the racial
Yes.
reckoning, and what's yours?
So my father takes this opinion and for many people who've read the book so far, it jumps out to them, and it was something that I put in the book from our conversation that I did not think would be as thought provoking as it is. But my father asserts this notion that we are back in 1954, right? And as somebody who's seen so much, because think about 1954, that's pre Brown v. Board of Education. That's before you get to the 60s when the world was on fire, Edmund Pettus Bridge, Vietnam. We don't even have to get to 68 when the world is on fire from Vietnam. You have February 8th of 68 where you have the Orangeburg Massacre. You have April 4th of 68 where you have the assassination of King. And then you have 6 weeks later, you have the assassination of RFK. And for somebody to live through all of those moments in history and then say that we are back before that, it jumps out. And I think for a lot of people reading the book, it sticks out to them. I disagree with him, though. And the reason I disagree with him is because I think about people like Jimmy Lee Jackson and Medgar Evers and Emmett Till. By the way, there's a really good book in here by Joy Ann Reid, which talks about that. So pick that
Medgar
up
and
too.
Murley.
Well, if you only got $30, pick mine up. But if you got 60, if you got 60, pick hers up too. But I think about Goodman, Schroeder, and Cheney. I think about Henry Smith, Samuel Hammond, and Delano Middleton. I think about all those people who gave what Abraham Lincoln called the last full measure of devotion. I think about all those people who were shot, all those people who laid on jailhouse floors. And I believe that if you say we have not made progress, then you question whether or not their sacrifices were in vain. And so I push back on my dad on that one notion because it also helps me articulate to him that his life and struggle has meaning. And so that's kind of how we start the book back and forth. He also believes for some reason, weirdly, that Kanye West should be doing more. And I'm like, Daddy, Kanye
He's doing the most.
Kanye been gone. Like he ain't been the right since the college dropout. So I don't know what we're talking about here. But he says that back then, Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier were everywhere doing everything.
That's true.
And we don't have enough of those people doing everything. And I'm like, well, you don't know what they doing, Daddy.
Yeah.
You don't know Beyonce and Jay actually bonded out all the protesters in Baton Rouge after Alton Sterling. I mean, you don't know the work that John Legend and Kerry Washington do, et cetera. So we do have this kind of intergenerational bickering because he likes to tell me what is truth.
Yes. Well, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the book and storytelling, because your first book, we got to peek into your life, a young Bakari Sellers making trouble on the campus of Morehouse College.
Correct. Yes.
And now it's a stark contrast, I think. Were you more hopeful in your first book, and are you still hopeful now?
Yeah. The best part of any book, I believe, is the author's epilogue or afterward, because you get all of these thoughts out, and you have an opportunity to sit in your thoughts for a while, and then you write your afterward. And my afterward was, you know how comedians go to different little comedy studios to try out material before they have the big stage. And so my afterward is a lot like that, because I like to go to Applebee's, right?
No judgment.
Yes, you judge me. You judge me. That's okay. Somebody gonna ask you on a date to Applebee's, and you're gonna like them a whole lot. And then you're gonna be sitting at Applebee's, and I'm gonna wave at you from across the bar. But I like Applebee's because they don't pour liquor like it's theirs, right? They actually pour the liquor at Applebee's. But I was talking to my bartender, and I asked my bartender what year she was born, and she told me she was born in 2000 and I was like, "There's more." And I began to think that a child born in 2000 has lived through 9/11, financial crisis, housing crisis, election of the first black president, Tea Party, re-election of the first black president, Parkland, Fort Hood, synagogue shooting, largest mass shooting in the history of the country in Las Vegas, Nevada, Mother Emanuel church shooting. They lived through Charlottesville. They lived through January 6th. They lived through October 7th. They've lived through a war in Gaza. They lived through Russia invading Ukraine. They lived through a pandemic. And they did all of this under the auspices of social media, where there are many people in this room who are still concerned about whether or not they're going to be in the Freaknik documentary, right? And they're still here. And I think this generation deserves a lot of grace because of everything that they've been through. And that's what gives me hope. We kind of end on the fact that I firmly believe that we're in the nadir. But King, who I hate quoting, but King said it best, that only when it's darkest can you see the stars. And so that's kind of how I encapsulate all my thoughts and get through this book and end there.
Yeah. Well, the difference between this book and your last book, your first book was, obviously all about your life. In this book, you pass the mic. There are a lot of interviews that take place. Of all the interviews, and we want people to buy the book to hear what folks had to say. But if you can just give a snippet, who was the most fascinating? Like, who said something that surprised
Reverend
you the
Dr.
most?
William Barber he is our generation's Ralph David Abernathy. I mean, you mix that with, he's almost when he speaks, it's a kind of bombastic. He controls the room because he is a North Carolina Baptist preacher. But when he talks, it has such fire and brim, but it's so intellectual. Mm-hmm. And he talks about something that we don't have a conversation enough about. And we do a little push and pull as well, but he talks about economics being the common denominator that brings us all together. Basically saying, if we take a message of economic prosperity to white folk in Appalachia, and we take that same message to black folk in Jackson, Mississippi, talking about access to first-class education and quality healthcare, maybe you can find some commonalities and bring folk together. It's a unique message during this time, but it's one that people need to hear. He was really, really good. I spoke to my friend, and you know him as well, Antoine Seawright, because Antoine has been somebody who for the past decade has been blinking the lights on the lack of attention being paid to black men in the political process. And in my first book, I talk about black women a lot. I even have a chapter that's just dedicated to the strength that is black women. And I think we have to give black women their flowers. But we've also done that and not paid attention to the voices of black men. And that over that past decade, you're starting to see slippage because of that. And so those are two very different ends of the spectrum in terms of just generationally voices of people I talked to. But they were just so, I talked to my brother about the black church because he was in the ministry. And it was more of a clarion call or challenge to the black church. But we really have some interesting voices which tie into my own kind of personal memoir type style. And the difference between this book and most books you read is that not only do we identify a problem, but we try to have a prescription for it. And the prescription is such that you may not agree, but I wanted to start a conversation because so many people are on the sidelines because you're tired, rightfully so. You're desensitized, and you're kind of like Fannie Lou Hamer, you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I kind of wanted to bring you off the sidelines and at least give you something to chew on that maybe you can talk to a colleague about.
I love what you said about black men. And a lot of people will ask me, because I think the media gets this wrong. So I'm curious your thoughts of these droves of black men that are lining up to vote for Trump, and they're going to hand Trump the election. And of course, right.
Where they at?
And Well, if we're going to talk about black men, let's talk about black men holistically. If we're going to talk about who's electing Trump, let's talk about the conservative white folks across the country
I talk
who are
about all
lining
of them,
up.
yeah.
Well, your thoughts on black men, though? Like, where do you believe that narrative that there are these droves of black men shifting to the Republican Party?
No, and I think that people analyze this election wrong. I tell people all the time this election is between three people: Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and the couch.
Yeah.
Now I coined that, and Charlemagne took it to TV. You can't be running with stuff we say in our group chat, Charlemagne. But I say that the couch is one of the most popular candidates in the history of the country, and don't run no ads. And people choose the couch all the time. Joe Biden's biggest threat to being reelected as president of the United States is not Joe Biden. I mean, it's not Donald Trump. It's people staying at home. And there are a lot of black men who feel unheard. And I'll give you the best example. I was asked recently, because Joe Biden is going to Morehouse College, what he should talk about. And I said, I think that I sourced some of this from the group chat. But one of the things that I admonished them about or warned them about was I don't need to hear, an hour-long speech on criminal justice reform.
Right.
Because apparently, in most people's eyes, that's all black men care about. I said that there has to be an economic message about growing your small business and entrepreneurship. There has to be a robust message about voting rights. And, my good friend Brittany, who brought this up, there has to be a conversation about the role black men can play in this fight over abortion and reproductive rights, because there is a role for us to play. But you have to look at this demographic holistically, and we simply have not.
Yeah. So for people who, have some frustration in this election, or just with the state of the world, quite frankly, what is the message of your book? Like, is the moment we're in right now, or are we waiting for the moment to happen?
We in it.
Yeah.
We looking up. We are in the hole.
Yeah.
We are looking up out of the hole. But I don't know. Like, my favorite chapter in the book is my letter to Stokely. I have a Dear Stokely, and listen, don't read Dear Stokely and try to compare it to Ta-Nehisi, because that man is a different level of brilliant. I mean, that's James Baldwin. I am just Bakari Sellers. Okay. But it was fun to write, because it's wild now, because millennials are parents. And the weird part about that, other than trying to teach my children about the virtues of Outcast, is that you get really scared because of everything that's going on. And we talk about, I think that the way that we miseducate children in this country is violent. What do you all know that in South Carolina we did a study recently? Could you guess the number one cause for children underperforming in elementary and middle school?
Cause?
Number one cause for underperformance. Hunger. Very many people do not get that. Man, she's good. Yeah, and when you say it, it ain't surprising. But it's hunger. And so, when we think about that, I remind people, when we talk about systems, right? And this is just going back to one of the chapters on COVID and one of the ways that we missed the mark. I remind people that I'm from Denmark, which means I grew up in a food desert. Food deserts where you can't go 1 to 2 miles and have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. What does that mean, though, tangentially, right? That means that you go in and you get a lot of processed meats, and you get the packs of Kool-Aid, and it's 10 for $1, and then you get the sugar, right? No, and for some of y'all who don't know, that's diabetes. And you get the sugar, and you got cardiovascular disease. You have all of these preventable illnesses, right? That's in one bucket. Then the other bucket is we lost our hospital, like many rural areas throughout the South. You lose your hospital, you lose what, unfortunately for most people, most poor people, is their primary healthcare provider. And what other people don't listen to or recognize, because we really don't do a great job of thinking in this country, is that if you're in a small town, small county, and you lose your hospital, you also lose your economic engine. Because not only are there hospital jobs, but there's a pharmacy right there.
Right.
There's a flower shop. There's at least one motel, because people got to stay somewhere.
Yeah.
And all those things go away with it. And so when we look at that, and then, in Denmark, because of our fractured infrastructure or antiquated infrastructure, we actually ended up polluting the water and making it less potable than Flint, Michigan, because the pipes were so old they couldn't afford to fix them. So they put a chemical in the water to try to fix it. So now our water is less potable than Flint, Michigan. And then you overlay that with a pandemic. Then it's no surprise that black folk are dying at higher rates. That's not just Denmark, though. That's the same story in Jackson. That's the same story in Huntsville and Mobile. That's the same story in Southern Georgia. And we did not address those systemic underlying issues. And so when people talk about what is systemic racism, I give them that example. And we just, again, got the check and passed it by. And we missed that moment where we could literally go in and spend some time addressing these underlying issues that cause so much devastation. And that's some of the conversation that we like to have in this book, where we take these ills that we see and ask why. And we try to get there.
I think I'm struck by what you were talking about with Denmark. It makes me think of municipalities like Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, for sure.
And so two things here, because there's always this narrative that the South is red. Being from the South is only red till it ain't. This Bible Belt is not predisposed.
No, but it's red.
But you look at what's happening in these pockets, like you look at what's happening in Georgia. I would argue Georgia's a purple state now. You look at our brother Randall Woodfin in Birmingham.
Yep.
There are pockets of blue in the South that I think have the potential to spread. And so when you talk about this policy, there are people who are so disenfranchised with the system because they're saying, you want me to believe in this system where the water poisons my children.
Correct.
The system throws my children, my son, in jail. Mm-hmm. My kids go to a dilapidated school. Correct. Every day they're saying, your life does not matter. And you have to give this message of, we're not asking you to believe in the system, we're asking you to believe in you. And how do you bridge that gap, especially when people don't understand the role of local, state, and federal government?
Well, first of all, I would articulate the systems in this country aren't broken, and I wish I would stop saying that. The criminal justice system in this country ain't broken. In fact, all these systems work the way they were intended to work.
Absolutely.
Like, systems are so unique because they work the way engineers build them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's first. So what I encourage people to do is, in this, I take the lessons. Everything that I do is like a lesson from SNCC. In fact, this book is dedicated to my children, my nieces and nephews, and the founders of SNCC. And so what I encourage people to do is they're twofold. My favorite American politician in history is Julian Bond. I just absolutely adore Julian, right? And I wrote in my first book, and I won't mention that part, but I wrote in my first book and was asked about it by somebody. I would much rather be called Julian Bond than Barack Obama. And it's not a slight at Barack Obama. I love the 44th president of the United States. I just love Julian that much more. But what Julian attempted to do was work within systems to deconstruct them. That was also necessary because my dad and Stokely were outside trying to throw rocks through the windows of those systems. And so I tell people that to say that it's necessary to have Bakari Sellers in the state legislature. Mm-hmm. It's also necessary to have DeRay and all our friends who are in Brittany and Latasha and all of those people who are in the streets galvanizing support because we have to have the pressure on these systems from inside and out. And we have to deconstruct these systems and reimagine them so that they look like us.
Mm-hmm. Well, how much in the book, because I think even a part of the system that you're talking about, people don't necessarily understand that the governor gets the check.
That's true.
And disseminates.
In most places, yeah.
Right. So you look at like a Tate Reeves in Mississippi.
Yeah.
Like he's not necessarily flooding.
But just remember that you got to pause and recognize that April in Mississippi is Confederate History Month. They just went and did that.
Let's have a moment of silence.
I know. But that also tells you, that also gives you just some understanding of the mind frame that you're dealing with. I mean, you have to remember now, and this is, I say this to say that I believe this to be my task in life. But, and you bring this up, and this is the depressing part, is that every ounce of change we've ever had in this country has been because of black blood that's flowed through the streets. Mm-hmm. And I articulate that in the book. And then people ask me, Bakari, please say more. And I would say that you don't get the Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act without the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The Edmund Pettus Bridge was a pivotal point in our country's history because on nightly news, you could finally see around the country, not just in the South, Black folk being bludgeoned by batons, police dogs, water hoses. And people were like, oh, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they really are treating those Black folk bad down there. And so you got those two things. You don't get the Fair Housing Act without the assassination of Dr. King, right? You don't have a conversation about George Floyd without there being a knee on the neck of somebody for 9 minutes. You don't take the Confederate flag down in South Carolina without 9 people being murdered in a Bible study. And so the way that I look at it is, and this is the unfortunate part, I say that the price for change for the people that you're talking about, the price is too damn high.
Yeah.
So I believe it to be my job to try to drive down the cost so that Black folk can have change in this country. And that may be a dystopian view, but I find that to be a very real view rooted in our country's history.
Because how long will it have to be this blood sacrifice?
It's like a blood tax. That's what Van Lathan called it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a blood tax. And, I just, I want Sadie and Stokely and Kai to grow up in a country that's a little bit different than that.
But what changes that? Like
I wrote a whole book about this.
But even ideas and philosophies, because I think at the end of the day, it's like changing hearts and minds.
Well, change also doesn't. This is the problem with this generation that I love and adore that's coming up behind us is that change does not come quickly either.
Yeah.
And to have a cost such as that, and to recognize that even when you pay that tax, it still doesn't come fast enough. Like, why are we here? Like, why am I doing this? Why should I care? And, and then you see the regressions that are taking place. And when I say regressions, I'm talking about I'm old enough to remember when racists were in their corners, the deepest, darkest corners, right? And they barely came outside. Or if they came outside, you didn't really know that they were racist. You didn't really know how they talked about you behind your back. But what we've done now is we've replaced those hoods and sheets with the eyes cut out with Brooks Brothers suits. And they now have like their own cable news show and talk radio because we've monetized racism in this country. There's an inherent value in racism. And when you see the people like Clay Travis or Tucker or Sean Hannity, or when you see the Black folk who perpetuate that, like Jason Whitlock or Candace Owens, or even recently Stephen A. Smith, you have to realize that some of the problems that we have are within our own community as being conduits to messaging that I find, in my personal opinion, to erode the values that we stand for. And so this task is really difficult when you're out here. And so we try to lay that out about how difficult this task is. But one, we've conquered before, we've overcome before. Two, it's going to take a collective effort of all of us alike to get our shoulder behind the wheel and get us out the ditch. And I think lastly, we have to simply become more re-engaged because there are a lot of people, a lot of institutions, one of which being the Black church, and I overgeneralize purposefully because I want y'all to stand up and tell me, but my church does this. Anyway. And our institutions are on the sidelines as well. And what I want with the moment is for there to be a 200-page book, which may make you say, I'm going to do just that much more.
I want to let you guys know we do want Q&A. So if you do have questions, you can start to line up to the mic. If you can't get to the
mic is under the clock. And the only thing I say about questions is questions have question marks.
Yes. It's not Sunday morning testify.
Yes. Okay.
So the shorter, the more concise you keep your questions, the more people will be able to ask questions. But I'll continue as you line up. But I don't know, Bakari. We have some dissension here because when you said like now we monetize racism in this country, and I was trying to think of a time we both grew up in the South. I kind of feel like it's always been this. Like this isn't a new phenomenon.
Yeah, no, I think it's new. And the reason I think it's new is what got me to think that it was new was a segment that Tucker did on Fox News where he laid out the great replacement theory.
Yes.
As a history major, I was like, ain't no way in hell somebody can get on national TV and talk about this nonsensical, anti-intellectual, racist ideology that's rooted in hatred, and it's in a silo now, reinforced. So you have a bunch of older white folk who watch this and now say, man, aha, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also all born out of fear. And the reason that it's slightly different is because there's a fear that's manifesting itself because the country's becoming browner. Because women are starting to speak up just that much more. And it is providing ripple effects of fear throughout the country.
But was it, I'll come to you in 1 second, but was it not always that? I mean, this is not the first Make America Great Again campaign we had.
No.
Ronald Reagan and all the others may have been more
and
articulate.
Lee Atwater. Yeah.
Right. As far back, even before that.
Sure.
But they may have been more articulate in their words and less clumsy in their thoughts, but just as harmful, just as racist, and just as damaging.
With the advent, for sure. I think, but that was, you're talking about in the realm of politics, which is so true. But with the advent of social media, with the perpetuation of this in our media silos, it's now mainstream. And what I was saying, what Atwater was brilliant because he had his, theory about how to win over black folk or make them stay at home, but it was clandestine. Mm. Right now, I'm saying that, okay, this is how I would push back on you. What was the most amazing part about January 6th or Charlottesville? They didn't wear hoods. Like nobody covered their face. One dude went to January 6th from Virginia and he had his work lanyard on. Mm-hmm. He went to conduct a whole insurrection with his badge on. And see, that's the difference, I would argue.
Well, we'll continue to debate this over Applebee's.
Yes, we will.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for this. I started reading your book the other night and I looked up the picture. Mm-hmm. So if you had to I have actually two quick questions.
Sure, yeah, yes, ma'am.
So if you had to recreate the picture, with Belafonte, Poitier, your dad, I believe it was John Lewis, because it was after Rikers.
Yeah.
Who would you have in that photo?
I love that.
That's the first one.
Man, first of all, I wouldn't be there because I'm not trying to be in Rikers. That's not my ministry. Ain't going to Rikers. What's your second question? Because I got to think about that. That's a good one.
This is for you and Tiffany. How pivotal, or what do you think will happen to the Black community after the Chicago Democratic Convention?
Oh my goodness.
So I don't know which
That's
one.
That's a good question. So let me answer the second one first. Well, let's do the first one first, and then we can back and forth about the second one. I think in that picture would be John Legend. In that picture, probably prior to the Oscars, would have been Will Smith. Probably still, because Will down for the cause. Will shows up everywhere when you need him. So I would say those two would probably be the individuals who were there. And we just have so many. I could see the picture now with like Justin and Justin. I talk about them in the book. The Justins from Tennessee. Mm-hmm. They're so dope. So Justin and Justin would probably be there. DeRay loved getting arrested, but he too old now. He probably out the getting arrested game. Who else would be there, Tiffany?
I'm waiting to hear some women's names.
No, the baddest one, of course, is our girl.
Angela?
Angela probably would get arrested.
Yes. Angela would invite you to try to arrest her.
Arrest me now. I can hear her. I can hear it in my ear. Miss Brown.
Latasha Brown.
Yeah,
American
Latasha
Hero.
Brown.
Yeah.
And her partner. That's who we put up there.
Yeah, Cliff Albright.
Cliff. So we'll put that'll be the Justins, Latasha, Cliff. We talk about all of them in the book. And Angela. Angela be the ringleader.
Yeah.
We're going to get arrested at 6 because that's what time the sun set right and we can get the lighting for this picture.
Yes.
Chicago. So we talked about policy a lot. And I would argue that one of the most inhumane, despicable, yet politically brilliant policy positions we've ever seen has been Greg Abbott.
Governor of Texas.
trafficking. I use that word intentionally. Migrants inhumanely to sanctuary cities. Now, I had to Google sanctuary cities. I was going on TV to talk about this, and I was like, what are sanctuary cities? Did y'all know there are sanctuary cities in Kansas? But you don't see no migrants going to Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa, there's sanctuary cities in Iowa. Yes, and you don't see buses of migrants going there. And what he is doing in such an inhumane fashion is pitting black versus brown. And you're now having these conversations which have become extremely loud about resources. And black folk are asking the question, which many people do not have an answer for, of why is this community getting these resources and we are not getting these resources? Or why do I have to, in New York, teach my kid virtually because you shut down the schools? And it's causing these just, I think it's a distraction, truly. I have a problem with the tone and tenor of conversation, but it's causing these discussions in our community that just right now, actually, I don't believe move the ball forward. And Chicago's going to be on fire.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of talk about this lack of enthusiasm among black voters. Again, it drives me crazy. I would no sooner lay the attempted failure of this democracy at the foot of black folks before I would make fun of Bakari for eating at Applebee's. You know, I think black people will show up and do what we do all the time. I think there is this misunderstanding that we are so in love with this here democracy that we want to save it. And I say all the time, we're saving ourselves. Y'all benefit from it. We're not altruistic. We're not trying to make a blood sacrifice. So I think after Chicago, we'll see what the October surprise is. But I think we will still show up. People like to compare the turnout to Obama years. We haven't seen that. Every year it's been 11 to 12% of black men who vote Republican. I think we'll see all the same. And at the end of the day, people will show up, cast their ballots. I do have concern about the couch. I think that's legitimate. But I think we'll show up. Now, who's going to win in November? That I don't know. Let us pray. But I do think we'll continue to show up. Did that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir.
Any comment from either of you about this UAW victory in Tennessee at the VW plant?
Oh.
Listen, the most amazing thing about South Carolina and its policies and where I was able to be a legislator is that we did not have less than 3% of our population, working population in South Carolina was unionized. We just had the longshoremen. And I was able to learn so much from them. And so my union growth is still along the path. And when I see these union victories around the country, it warms my spirit because, to tie into the book, I'm reminded of when Dr. King was assassinated. And I'm reminded of why he was there. Because there was a sanitation worker who died a very gruesome death because of the conditions that sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee were going through. And so anytime you have victories to continue the legacy of Dr. King, I'm 100% excited about that.
Thank you for that question. I would just say it's interesting seeing what's happening in labor now, because I think you have these labor organizations that we have, boast these really big numbers, but it's becoming fractured in some ways where you do have these victories in terms of collective bargaining and, they try to bleed labor by 1,000 cuts in right to work states to eliminate it because they're thought to be predominantly Democratic voting. But when you disaggregate the data, there are a lot of members of unions who vote Republican. So I'm curious to see how, these overarching victories benefit the greater good, but individuals may vote against their interests. So we'll see.
Unions, and in particular, unions in 2 states are going to be determinative of the president of the United States. Michigan, as we know. Yeah. Not Ohio is gone. Ohio is red, okay?
It's red
Sorry
state.
to tell y'all that, but red. But the other one is Nevada.
Yes.
Because there is, listen, with all due respect to any union workers in here, the baddest and most organized union in the country is the Culinary Union in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah.
They take time off and go and knock on doors and organize and call. They make sure all their members' families vote, Clark County is so essential to who the next president of the United States is. That's why I like going to Vegas right now, just to check and make sure everybody is doing the work they're supposed to be doing for this election. I need to go back.
Yes. Thank you for your sacrifice,
your
Bakari. Thank you for your question, sir. Did I see a hand? No. So I want to get back into the union thing, because I think that's such an interesting response. The labor movement, I think, has changed throughout the decades. Obviously, I worked in...
It's spreading, even in sport. Yes.
Yeah. Can we continue to count on the labor movement to be a stronghold when it comes to voting Democrat down ticket?
I think that we are seeing, because of Donald Trump, we are seeing a reformation and shifting of normal kind of voting paths, and it's kind of wild to see. I mean, I think when we look back at history in 20 years, 40 years, we're going to try to understand how Donald Trump pulled off successfully one of the greatest cons we've ever seen in American political history. This man uses the bathroom on gold or gold-plated toilets, and he's convinced poor people he speaks for them. Mm-hmm. And it's a weird kind of realignment that we're going through right now. And a lot of that has to do with race. Mm-hmm. A lot of that has to do with what weirdly is relatability to Donald Trump. They see their grievance in Donald Trump. And there was a unique convergence of populism between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Because when you're talking about free trade, for example, when you're talking about the fact that Donald Trump made labor and workers a legitimate outreach point for him. So you're seeing some realignment. Where that lands, nobody knows. I have my theories about this race, but I know this race is going to come down to college-educated white women in suburbs in about 7 states.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, about right. So the states that are going to determine who the next president of the United States are Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Georgia is last, shaky. But the one that's going to be in the race that I want everybody in this room to watch, because this black man is absolutely nuts.
Mark Robinson.
Is North Carolina.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know where y'all got him from.
The internet comments.
No, and the crazy part is one of y'all probably related to him. I mean, he is nuts. But Josh Stein is just a brilliant, good former or current attorney general of the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
You have a black Baptist pastor who lives in, he's like a iteration of a Boondocks character. And it's a fascinating contrast to watch. And so North Carolina is going to be determinative. And I believe that the race will be won based upon these suburbs and cities like Philadelphia, Wayne County, Clark County we just talked about, Tucson, that area outside of Tucson and Phoenix, Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, the Research Triangle, Wake Forest area. Yeah, so that, and I believe that you said it, like, black folk are going to do what they do. Mm-hmm. You can kind of scratch off white male evangelicals.
Yes.
So that only really leave one other demographic, and that demographic helped out Joe Biden last time.
Well, there are more demographics than that,
I get you, but there are. But for the purposes of this election, I think, in particular, the issue of abortion is going to, because this is what people have to realize.
I don't know, Bakari. Let me just say.
No, chime in.
Okay. So when we talk about the voting bloc of white women, and a lot of people have been saying, Republicans screwed themselves because of Dobbs out of SCOTUS. In 2016, when Brian Kemp was running for governor, super conservative, ultra-right, expert in voter suppression, he was running on reproductive rights. Or the opposite of it, trying to revoke reproductive rights. He, self-proclaimed what they call pro-life. We call anti-choice.
They
but let
they
me
are
just
pro
say,
life until the baby gets here.
right? They're pro fetus, but white women in Georgia outpaced even white men in voting for him. So it makes me very nervous when we are hanging our lives and livelihood and the existential crisis we're in America around the
I
neck of
don't
them.
disagree with you. I was just
Okay.
giving a flat out analysis.
Well, what do you
But I'm
think they
just
will
saying,
do? Is the question.
well, I mean, look at what happened in Kansas with abortion on the ballot. I'm not talking about Manhattan or Baltimore. Look at what happened in Ohio with abortion on the ballot. And this is what fascinates me, because I had this revelation the other day watching your homeboy Clarence Thomas. I was watching him. I was watching the Supreme Court the other day, and I realized that Clarence Thomas and Alito are 70-something years old. So I also deduced that if Donald Trump's reelected, he will have appointed 5 members of the United States Supreme Court, which would thereby make him the most consequential president in the history of the United States for things that most people don't believe in.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say most people, but 74 million people did, which is still wild to me. And so I think that when you if you got a question, come to mind. I think that when you analyze it as such, maybe people will have that fierce urgency of now, or maybe they'll just say, "What the hell with it?"
Yeah. Come on. Hi there.
What's up, man?
I have a feeling that people, I think, are taking politics as sort of just the normal process. We're just doing our thing. We're talking about abortion issues and whatnot. For me, you see what the Supreme Court has been doing. They're basically enabling fascism. They're enabling a authoritarian mindset. To me, that's the big issue, because once you go there, and particularly Donald Trump, because he's basically a madman. He has no ideology. So basically, and they're giving all the power to this man, and then they're taking, he's going to do this. I forget what the Heritage Foundation is doing, but they're going to stop
Project 25 out of the Heritage
but
Foundation.
all these dudes who are just very radical. So I'm just saying, that to me is the real issue. But unfortunately, that's, you got to study history. You have to understand fascism.
That's not sexy.
Right.
That's not sexy. And I tell the White House this all the time. Like, look, I get the threat to democracy, but ain't none of my homeboys really coming out to vote to preserve democracy. Mm-hmm. That just ain't really why they coming out. I don't know too many college students that are going to be here and be like, man, that threat to democracy got me shaking in my boots. Yeah. Let me go cast this ballot.
Yeah.
The problem, and I don't like mentioning them in the same sentence. However, I will for the purposes of this. The problem with Joe Biden and Donald Trump is that they both regurgitate the past. Now, they do it in different ways. Donald Trump is more of a grievance, and Joe Biden gets kind of caught in this nostalgia. Neither one of them will articulate a vision for the future. Clearly. And that's what I try to get them to do all the time. Like, somebody tell me what it's going to look. You might not be here, but tell me what it's going to look like for Sadie and Stokely. Like, I understand that, if democracy goes, we might not have a country. No. I want to make sure that Sadie and Stokely can live free, healthy, and happy, love who they want to love, get educated in the best schools, not have to worry about these books being thrown out, not have to worry about, the preventable illnesses and all of these things, drinking clean water, getting good jobs, making sure their HBCUs are taken care of. They can get a scholarship to Duke that they can't get right now. Talk to me about what the future is going to look like. And I think both of them, for different reasons, get stuck in in yesterday. And that's going to be, I think, Kamala to Biden is doing that. We just have to get on the train and get it to do more of that. Thank you for your question.
Question behind you.
Yes, ma'am. And fuchsia is your color. Yes. That is a good color.
Thank you. I'm new to you, so my apologies. I don't know a lot about either one of you, but I will. So 2 questions. One, you had mentioned earlier that you and your dad didn't agree on something.
Yeah.
And wondered what that was. And then the second question is, what's next for you?
Oh, so I was just talking about my dad and I really don't agree with his posture of where we are as a country. And I just like to give credit to, I stand on the shoulders and you talk about women. I mentioned this the other day, but like when people ask me who was like my Mount Rushmore of like civil rights, mine is like, and Stokely's not on it, ironically enough. No, I know that's crazy. Mine is Sarah Mae Fleming, who is one of the baddest women that I know. Sarah Mae Fleming, and I know that I can tell by some of the looks. Y'all are like, who the hell is Sarah Mae Fleming? Sarah Mae Fleming was a 22-year-old domestic worker that laid the foundation in action and law for another young lady who sat down 18 months later named Rosa Parks. Right? So Sarah Mae Fleming's on that list. Ella Baker's on that list. Fannie Lou Hamer is on that list. And the reason Stokely ain't on the list is because you don't get the Stokely without Fannie Lou and Ella. And last but not least is I'm a creature of politics, love politics. And you cannot love politics without loving Shirley Chisholm. And so those are kind of the four people who are on my. Now, if we had we could draw something on the bottom, I put my daddy up there and Stokely and Julian, and Marion Barry. I love Marion. There's absolutely nobody that can talk bad about Marion Barry around me.
Yes.
Uncle Marion was a bad man now.
Amazing mayor.
They still love him out here in the streets. You go out here and you find somebody that's 60 years old in D.C., they're going to tell you about their work program.
Yep.
They're going to tell you about the summer jobs program, the middle class, government contracts. Yeah, so I like to lift them up, which is why I tell a lot of those stories. What's next for me? I don't know. I feel like there was an entire generation of this is what I talk about in therapy. By the way, I go to therapy for y'all who do not go to therapy, but that's why I go to therapy. But there's an entire generation of older men that did not tell us how difficult maintaining healthy relationships are and the type of work that goes into it. And so I'm focused on being like a really good dad and a good husband. That's like top, because it's hard. And I think I missed the memo on the work that was supposed to go into this. But I'm doing it. I'm doing the work every single day. Like healthy relationships require you to work every single day. They should make you put on your resume like married to under career experience.
Yeah.
And so I am working on that. And if there's an opportunity in Congress one day, people ask me would I run for Jim Clyburn's seat, and without hesitation, I always say yes. But that yes is coming with more hesitation now because I'm getting older and my platform is bigger than, humbly, 300 of them or 400 of them. And then I ask the question, like, how many of you all choose jobs where you intentionally go work with people you do not like? Like what I look like sitting on committee with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
That just sounds like a waste of time to me.
Yeah. But Congress isn't the only office. I mean, would you go for the upper chamber? You have two Republicans and
I don't believe in political
if
martyrism.
Tim Scott is, but if Tim Scott is selected as VP, I don't think he will be. But he's trying really hard. But if the opportunity arises, would you consider it? Or
we're not. South Carolina's not ready yet, and I think this is where Stacey deserves the credit. People are like, "Oh my God, Georgia's purple." Stacey started that 12 years ago.
Yeah, in the state legislature,
hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Going precinct to precinct, sub-precinct to sub-precinct to mobilize and change a red state and make it purple. We have not put in that work in South Carolina. It's also a different state. Many people want to know why Virginia and North Carolina and Georgia are purple, whereas Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, South Carolina are what they are. And people forget that in Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, you have these epicenters of knowledge acquisition. You have Richmond, Arlington in Virginia. In North Carolina, you have the Research Triangle in Charlotte. In Atlanta, I call Georgia Atlanta. In Georgia, you got Atlanta and maybe Chatham County a little bit. South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, we really don't have those kind of bastions that are an educational and economic engine. Come on, you get the last question.
Last question.
My homegirl, what's up?
Hey, first of all, Bakari, I am extremely proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to see you. First of all, a lot of people will not know this, but you were a part of the reason why I ended up here.
Oh, yeah.
And I sincerely appreciate everything that you've done for me, and I want to say that publicly.
She's at the DNC doing great work over there. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Because like the people's shoulders that you stand on and like so many of us stand on, How do young people like myself who want change and demand change, how do we demand that without feeling as if we are trying to push the elders out of the way?
Yeah. My answer is you push them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, look, and I talk about this in the book as well. Like, we have a tendency in our churches, in our institutions, to retain leadership, even when it's detrimental to that institution. You see it in the black church all the time. Preacher won't go home. You see it in the CBC all the time. You like, I love you. I really, really love you. But there's really, you go and relax and put your feet up and let that other person who might be mayor of such and such city or whatever it is have an opportunity to come up here and get 10 or 15 years in, because there's an exchange of ideas. I stayed in office in South Carolina for 10 years, consciously did it. And then when I left, when I got elected, I was 21 years old. When I left, they elected a 23-year-old black man because they were like, oh, it can be done. Right. We can do this. And so I think it's okay to push them respectfully, kind of walk them to the door. But we do have to have a conversation about secession. We have to have a conversation about generational planning. And at the end of the day, a lot of times people will not give you leadership. Sometimes you just have to take it. And so I'll end by saying three things. One, a huge thank you to Politics and Prose for allowing this country boy from Denmark to come in here and just talk to y'all for an hour. Two, a huge thank you to all of you all. Even if you don't get the book, your support is amazing. But I oftentimes tell people that it's very difficult when you're out here hawking books on tour like this, because you realize in the back of your head that if you don't do well, other black folk ain't gonna get the opportunity to. And so that's number two. And number three, to Tiffany Cross, who is one of the dopest, most amazing individuals. Listen, you know how many old men in the barbershop be telling me about Tiffany and Angela? What she smell like? She smell good. What you talking about? What she smell like? She smell like Werther's Originals. Tiffany is amazing. She's smart. She's brilliant. If Kai and Sadie can grow up and be like Tiffany, I would have done a good job as a father. So thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Bakari. So he's going to sign books, so he'll be here. You dropped your sponsor.